This is Craig Nadeau with AGC. I appreciate everybody taking time out of the day to join this. And Brian and Eugenia, thank you very much for agreeing to host this for our members. I know you both assured us that you'll give us nothing but good news. So with that being said, we appreciate your guys' time, and we appreciate you guys doing this for us. And I'll turn it over to you, and hopefully after the presentation, I'll kind of leave it up to you, Brian and Eugenia, to how to solicit questions. And if anybody would like to just send a question through chat to Alexis, I think she would be happy to ask group questions as necessary. So again, thank you everyone, and Brian and Eugenia, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, for the questions, we'd rather do it through the video so everybody can hear the questions. But if the chat works through Alexis and she can read the questions out, that works too. No worries. We're going to kick it off. Eugenia's going to kick it off and talk about some background information, national level down to the region, and some through the economic indicators that we have in hand. There's some data. Of course, this data lag, taxation data, which is that consumer data. They don't even have the April data out yet, so we're just going to go through what we do have. Go ahead, Eugenia.
Thank you, Brian, and let me share our presentation. Everybody see that? Well, good morning, and thank you for having us. As Brian mentioned, Brian asked me to cover kind of what's happening with the general, the national, and the local economy. So we'll look at some indicators. As Brian also mentioned, we really love, especially with this COVID pandemic impact, we would love to see some expenditure impacts. Taxable sales information is not out. We're expecting it to come out any day now, but we don't have that. So this is really what we have to date. And it will just give you, there's so much data out there. This will give you a kind of a quick overview. And then, as Brian mentioned, please feel free to ask questions. So on the national level, prior to COVID last year and kind of the beginning of this year, the economy was growing, national and local as well, was growing at what we like to call increasing at a decreasing rate. Before, we had some incredible growth in the since the recession. The car was driving about 60 miles an hour. We'd like to say now we're driving at about 20 miles an hour. We're still going strong. We were still going forward. There was no really declines in any significant economic variables, but growth was kind of slowing down and getting a little more sustainable. We couldn't grow long term at the rates we have in the past. So things were looking pretty good. The predictions of a recession kept getting pushed back to 2021, 2022. So things were looking pretty good. And then the pandemic hit. So unlike the recessions that are caused by economic forces, this was a medically caused recession. So we did not see it coming in terms of the economic variables fluctuating. But it did happen. We don't have good GDP data. GDP is what we use to really measure the health of the economy. We only have the first quarter data. We're still in the second quarter, so we don't have that. But in the first quarter, even though the economy was really not hit significantly until the businesses were closed at mid-March, we saw a 1.25% decline in the GDP. We like to annualize GDP, and all that means is we multiply it by the 4 quarters. So in the annualized rate, we were looking at about a 5% decline. Unemployment rate in May, which is obviously the latest data we have, was 13.3%. This is all national, compared to 14.7% in April. So as businesses were reopening, we were seeing a drop in unemployment, but it was still over 3% higher than we saw earlier this year and last year. And then personal consumption expenditures, this data is available through April nationally, and we saw some pretty significant declines in expenditures, both as businesses were closed and people were not shopping, but also as with the uncertainty, people didn't want to spend their money. So that's what happened. Where are we looking for projections for the recovery? A group called the National Association of Business Economists surveyed its members, who are primary economists who work for larger businesses doing forecasts and outlooks. So these are the people who really have their their hands on the pulse of where the economy is going. The median, these tables show the median predictions for these variables. They're expecting GDP, which as we see in the first quarter declined by about 5%, to decline by another 33.5%. Again, this is multiplied by 4, so this is an annualized rate, but in the second quarter. So a significant decline, that makes sense. April and May, most of the businesses were still closed. But what's interesting is the expectation for the recovery starting in the third quarter. They're expecting that we're going to, there's a talk of that pent-up demand, that GDP is expected to increase by 9.5%. Again, you have to divide that by 4 to get the quarterly amount, but if you look at how that compares to even historical growth, this is some significant increases. And what's also interesting is the surveys was conducted in April of 2020 and June of 2020, and the increase in the GDP projections, the economists are becoming a little more optimistic about the recovery all the way through 2021. What's interesting is on the civilian unemployment rate projections, they are a little more pessimistic, expecting that unemployment will continue at 7% through the end of 2021. Same thing with personal consumption, not significant increases, though there is a growth in personal consumption. And again, all of this and our ability to recover is going to depend on the length of the recession and the ability to control the pandemic. Do we have half measures, or do we actually create a vaccine and solve the problem and then deal with it economically? So these projections obviously come with a number of caveats. The biggest is, when is the pandemic going to be resolved and how? Taking it to a local level, same kind of idea. We were growing at an increasing at a decreasing rate. We've gained, I'm sure you all have seen in the Reno Sparks and MSA, we were gaining over 10,000 jobs a year for about 5 years in the past. 2019, we went down to about 5,000 jobs a year. And that's, again, we could not grow at the rates we have been growing. And part of it was we were employing basically anybody we could employ. We ran out of people to employ. And this is shown in these unemployment graphs. The graph to the left, the lower left graph, shows kind of the regional Story, Churchill, Lyon, and Washoe County unemployments. And the graph on the upper right shows national unemployment by industry. We don't have industry unemployment data for local, but it is interesting at the national level. So what these both graphs show is that we were at unemployment levels that were below the natural unemployment rate. So we were hiring all the people that were available to be hired. So we could not expect 10,000 jobs per year like we have in the past. But we were still experiencing strong growth, and growth in certain sectors more than in others. So this is, in 2019, this is, I think, one of my most favorite graphs. It's colorful, but it also shows a lot of information in a single graph. And what it shows on the x-axis, if you see the bubbles to the left are the ones that declined in their concentration of employment. And these are, each bubble represents an industry, and the size of the bubble is how many employees that industry has. To the right are industries that increased in their employment concentration. On the x-axis, so on top, are industries that have high employment concentration compared to the national levels. For example, in Reno Sparks and throughout Nevada, we have a high concentration in leisure and hospitality, higher than at the national levels. So above that one, kind of the center line, the 1.0 line, are industries that are highly concentrated, which means they produce enough for local consumption, but they also export. Those are your exporting industries, and then you really want to grow these. Industries below are then industries that are not highly concentrated. you really want to focus on the industries that are in the upper right-hand corner. Those are star industries. And in the 4-county region that we're looking at here in 2019, construction and manufacturing were industries that were not only nationally important as they were exporting things, products out of the area, they were also growing. So these are the industries we needed to focus on. They were driving the growth in our regional economy. So that was construction and manufacturing. On the upper left hand were mature industries, including transportation and warehousing, which, while they experienced a decline in their concentration over the last 5 years, they were still highly important and still exporting industries. So just kind of set the stage of where we were and what was happening, and that some industries were growing quicker than others and creating kind of the basis of our growth. So what happened? COVID hits, economy is shut down in mid-March. We're now at, Nevada has the highest unemployment rate of all the states in the US at 25.2% in May. I really like this table because it shows that not all areas have been hit the same. If you look at Clark County, they have 29% unemployment in May. Eureka County has 3.8% unemployment, a significant difference. And what really provides the difference between these unemployment rates is the concentration of industry. Obviously in Vegas, leisure and hospitality provides a very strong basis of their economy, and that was shut down. Eureka is more mining, less impacted by a pandemic. So we often see data provided at state level. This shows that we can't look at data at the state level because there's just such a difference among the counties and the regions. What happened there at Reno-Sparks MSA in terms of employment? We all know leisure and hospitality lost quite a few jobs. Transportation was also impacted. These are the obvious first tier impacted industries. Economy closed, you couldn't go to the restaurants, hotels, leisure and hospitality were impacted. So, second round was the professional and business services, the attorneys and the accountants providing services to the impacted businesses. Also wholesale trade, impacted businesses were not restocking their supplies. We've seen the first 2 rounds of impacts. We're now expecting the 3rd round impact, and that would be the government and the construction sectors. And so this table shows construction has not been impacted. Government has to some degree, but not highly. So that's really the next wave of employment impacts that we're expecting. What's also interesting about this table is that the top impacted industries in terms of loss of employment have wages, except with a few exceptions in the professional business services, they have wages that are less than average wage. So it's really the lower income families and employees that are being impacted by the job losses. A little bit more, before we looked at the previous chart was the 3-month period impacting COVID, so March through May. This is May numbers only. Compared to April, we actually gained 5,900 jobs in the MSA. And the Reno-Sparks MSA includes Washoe and Story counties. We like to include Story as that's where a Tri-Center is located with quite a bit of our employment. So even though we gained 6,000 jobs, we're still down about 29,000 jobs compared to same month last year. Our unemployment is 16% in Washoe County. But again, as mentioned, we gained construction and manufacturing jobs, and that's important because those are, as we talked previously, those were the jobs driving the growth in our economy before the pandemic. Leisure and hospitality, of course, lost 15,000 jobs as expected. And so where do we go from here? Some basic predictions. Despite the reopening, we're expecting very slow recovery in certain industries, while other industries are essentially going to return to business as normal. So the slow industries to recover are travel, oil and gas, automotive, and discretionary income industries. So all the industries that are really impacted by our confidence levels in returning to travel, going out to eat, going on vacations. This is an interesting survey that showed that significant numbers of US adults are not comfortable doing these kind of discretionary spending activities. That's going to continue to impact the industries that benefit from these spendings. As we talked about future impacts on government, we're expecting significant shortfalls, both at the federal, state, and local levels. And the governments are going to be looking to increase either existing rates or find new sources of revenue. Their stock of, obviously not necessarily possible, but income tax, estate tax, new impact fees. There's a lot of discussion about new sources of revenue, and also just increases in existing sources like sales tax, which is usually kind of the easiest one that everybody tries to change. And then reductions of expenditures, both at the employment and service levels, and that not only will include furloughs, but also deferral of capital projects. So less maintenance, less new projects. So we'll definitely be seeing that in the coming years. It hasn't hit us yet, but we're definitely going to see that, especially with the new budget year coming up. And then impact on the construction industry. And the extent of this impact will depend on the length of recovery. We have not seen much impact, as Brian will talk in a second, about the construction and development industry. We have not seen much impact, but we will if this continues long term. And again, it will be impacted by the deferral of projects, by consumer and business confidence in purchasing homes or building offices, and also changes in consumer preferences. We're going to have quite a few people starting to work from home and not need the size of offices and the type of buildings that we had in the past. But as Brian will say, that we'll talk, there's some light at the end of the tunnels. There are some state and federal programs aimed at kind of supporting the industry. And I guess with that, I'll just turn this over to Brian. So we still muted.
Thanks, Eugenia. Yeah, let's get into some development and strategies for moving forward. Here's commercial permits starting in 2001. You see in the lighter blue line how we've reached the levels of pre-Great Recession with the valuation of commercial permits. And then, of course, the drop-off starting in 2019 for all the reasons that Eugenia covered. So it happened before, in fact, in 2000, commercial permits valuations have stabilized. You see the actual permit, number of permits in the black line not reaching those levels of pre-Great Recession. And that's because of most of the development in commercial was in industrial, large footprint industrial. And moving forward, a lot of the barriers to commercial construction is much of the same, high cost, labor shortage, financing, and those kind of things will continue. High vacancy rates, of course, in office and retail, the commercial components will continue. They'll grow greater, these vacancy rates. And so in those areas of commercial construction, expect the same and even worse. But industrial, manufacturing, distribution, data centers still holds very well for our region. However, I do want to point out there is a lot of pent-up demand in the projects that you're hearing in the news. I don't know what status they are at, including the McKinsey's new office building, the new Hyatt at the Summit Sierra, Park Tolls stuff at Ranch Hera, the new ice rink down south, the Neon Line, which is that West 4th Street work, the Harris Mixed Use by CAI Investments, the Kimpton Hotel and Residential on Court Street, which is CIA Investment, Park Lane, the Reno Public Market across the street from Park Lane, that's under construction, the T3 projects east of Harris, and then out in the Tri-Center, the Victory Logistics Center in Fernley, I should say, and then Reno Tahoe Industrial Centers 2.0, which will be in the southwest of Fernley. So you've got all this pent-up demand, so construction we'll see on the commercial side. On the residential permits, we never did, reach those pre-Great Recession levels in the residential permits, and that was due to lower population growth rates that we've experienced even during this recovery period. We've only been at 1.5 to 2% annual growth in population. A lot of assumptions that we're growing gangbuster because of all the traffic activity. You see the rooftops being built, but pre-recession, Great Recession, we were doing 3 to 4% pop growth per year. We've only been doing 1.5 to 2, so we really aren't seeing the new bodies come in. And then the lack of permits is also with that labor shortage, high cost for development, and a little bit of that residual from the foreclosures and during the Great Recession. And a lot of this activity that's dropping off in 2009, the residential permit, is because of so much multifamily construction in the hopper right now. As of March, we were tracking 29 multifamily projects in Washoe County that are building over 7,000 units. That's a big bite off. So we're seeing those multifamily permits drop off. 2017, we pulled 3,000 multifamily permits, and in 2019, it was down to 1,900 units. And all of 2020 through May, we've pulled 4 multifamily unit permits. The single-family permits in 2020 through May have actually improved. We pulled 858 compared to 785 single-family permits in 2019. So we're actually pulled more permits this year than last year in the single-family. And this permits, you're seeing, the healthy permit numbers reflected in the new home sales. Next slide. So this is 5 months by month, the new home sales in those bars with the valuation in the red line. In calendar year to date through May in Washoe County, we were selling more new single-family homes, the most amount since 2007. So we were on track to really blow the doors off the last 5-6 years and reach 2000 levels of new home sales, even though our prices were up to 480, 500,000 at the median price. We did see a drop off in that May number, a little bit of reduction, and that's it's both COVID and price sensitivities to that, surpassing the 500K amount. Next slide. But we're seeing that, and the caveat with monthly sales is the peaks and valleys. So monthly data is great and all, but we really want to see this quarterly and semi and annual data come together. But you're seeing that on the national scale also that new home sales up, and this is kind of what's happening across the nation. And you're seeing the median values of the new home sales increasing, which means a strong demand for the new home sales. In fact, the home builders added 225,000 workers in May across the nation because of this demand for the new home sales. On the flip side, the existing home sales is taking a hit, and that's because of the supply. The listings, the inventory is drastically reduced. Sellers are not putting the homes up. They do not want the personal contact with buyers and the real estate industry professionals, and so the inventory is really shrinking back, as you can see in that right hand of the 2020 months of how that reduction. We're expecting about 30 to 40% reduction of existing home sales through 2020 as long as the pandemic continues. However, we are seeing the prices are stabilizing. The prices are holding in there, which shows that there's still demand, and that the sellers are not desperate to sell. They have equity. They can hold on for a while. If they do lose their job, you got the federal PPP programs helping out. So right now the price is stabilizing, and those no rush, no people bolting out of town and trying to fire sell homes is what we're seeing with the prices so far, which is we expect to continue. And on both sides, of new single family and existing, we're expecting the demand to stay pretty high in our region due to these COVID impacts on baby boomers in the population dense areas, very low interest rates, millennials in high-tech industries moving in with high wages, and the future additional tax burden on already high-tax states is probably going to cause another population immigration wave into our area. And that is seen, next slide. And that demand we're seeing is also being reflected with EDON's current activity with industry relocation to the area. They are reporting a significant increase in prospect activity, even though they're not going out to site selection meetings, they're not going to trade shows, they're not traveling, which they have a team of 3 that go out constantly traveling and meeting with industry executives to try to draw them back to the region. You know, of course, since March, they've ceased that activity, but they're still seeing a significant increase in that prospect of 42 new leads, a 15 pending announcement, you know, into that distribution, logistics, manufacturing, tech, all our sweet spot industries in our area. So great news that people are really looking at our area, especially now, wanting to get out of high-tax areas and areas where they can operate really quickly and relocate very quickly and get permits, like in Story County in 30 days to break ground on the construction. Across the nation, what EDON's reporting is that, you know, those sweet spot industries of manufacturing, logistics, technology, is their biggest concern is the impact on their supply chains, and they're really looking at the dependence on these foreign suppliers. And again, this is a national issue of concern that promotes these type of bringing onshoring these new supply chains and bringing them back into our region to create that parallel supply chains. And we're already starting with those linkages in those industries in our region from our heavy activity in their, you know, Reno Sparks with, you know, chips taking down the Unar farms, more industrial, into the Tri-Center with, you know, Google being active. Northern Nevada Industrial Center has an approved handbook to develop more contiguous to the Tri-Center. Roger and Lance doing the Tri-2, taking down up to 20,000 acres for more industrial. Southwest of Fernley got Victory Logistics District, about 4,000 acres in that Fernley Opportunity Zone. Even the Pyramid Lake tribe wants to jump in that game around Wadsworth with data centers, solar farms, industrial. You got the Hazen Industrial Park over in Churchill County, not too far away from Fernley. And don't forget about the Naval Air Station in Fallon, who's expanding and bringing in, they're in need of 300 more housing units to grow their operations, which creates even more opportunity for these, for professional business services and the linkages we have. So we're very ripened for the area. State level, they are prioritizing, you know, their action plan. They're developing a plan through Governor's Office. Go to that, please. Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's kind of 2.0. If you remember, Sandoval bringing on Steve Hill for 1.0 after the Great Recession impacts to create this plan. To do these, you know, back then the talk was singles and doubles for our recovery after the Great Recession, especially up north. We had nothing, and then luckily we hit these a grand slam with Tesla and brought that in. In the South, you know, they got the Faraday that really didn't work out. However, they went down the pro sports industry list of the Golden Knights, the WNBA Aces, and then the Raiders. And so the you know, the South bet on black. They're going, you know, with the pro sports with the Raiders, and up here we're going, you know, we fell into this manufacturing and tech world up north. So going forward with this 2.0 from GoEd, this is the next kind of step. You got a new governor, you got a whole new governor's office, you know, leader, Michael Brown, who's from the mining industry. And so this, you know, these things are 10,000-foot plans. They're very squishy. It's kind of what you find in most states. They all talk about pretty much the same thing. But if you kind of read in these tea leaves of these plans, you kind of get an idea of what the governor and his team find important, which is, it's helpful when you're strategizing where your company wants to go. So we're just going to go down real quick to these. There are 5 priorities of action. Priority 1 is more resources for people and businesses. It's really just about financial systems and creating better financial systems, integrating the state financial systems, getting more people to use banks. There's a lot of people that still use credit cards and non-traditional, high rate stuff. They want to get them out of that. The next priority for action is some business support and expansion. This is really near term, the policies and procedures for the reopening, and then long term to recruit more high tech. Of course, this is what everybody wants. Third priority is looking at the workforce. We're really going to need to retool our workforce, especially at leisure and hospitality. I think Vegas is really kind of figuring that out. We figured it out thanks to the Indian Gaming Compact of 2001. When we started losing our gaming, we had to figure out a whole new something for our workforce. And so this is kind of the state knows we have to retool. They're really looking at the community colleges level, trade schools, of how to get the workforce retrained, reskilled into the 21st century of high tech and manufacturing. In fact, they're actually saying they want to fund community colleges. I don't know if you remember, after the Great Recession, there was a lot of cuts to the community colleges. Presidents left after a couple of those legislative sessions when they did cut that, immediately bailed out. And so you're seeing within this new governor's office, they really are going back into the community college and the trade schools, which I think is a great idea. The fourth priority they're looking at, new technology for businesses. That's what we're always kind of looking at, so nothing new there, except however you look at that long-term resilience, data for decision making, better data integration. This should have been done decades ago in our state, where you combine taxation data with deeder data, with assessor data, with demographic data, with development data, with permits. It should all be centralized. It's great for our region, and we're tied to the climate change effects, so getting down to more of a zero carbon, better technology. And the try to is we're going to need infrastructure. We're going to need a serious backbone of infrastructure out in that region with water, sewer, hit with impact fees, and they're not going to want to pay too much. And so we're really going to need to rely on that federal funding, and that's across the board. As this gets negotiated, of course, things will fall out. Maybe things will add in. But this is really important for our region, and we all really need to get educated on this Moving Forward Act, and we need to support it and talk to our congressional reps. Because if we don't, you're really looking at a loss of construction jobs. There's a hodgepodge of changing orders, delays, cancellations, where there's projects with good